All right. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here, live at YouTube and subscribing platforms. On election day, get out and vote. And as the Irish in Boston like to say, vote early and vote often. I'm kidding. Heather Dugan is my guest. Heather has watched lifelong friendships frayed, in some cases completely destroyed in the wake of the most polarizing presidential election in modern history. Heather, you couldn't have put it more succinctly. I mean, tell us about it. How did you experience this polarization?
Well, I actually have a group of women that I have put together several years ago, and it's been interesting as we went through the last election. There were obviously some different opinions, et cetera. I think for the most part, we've managed to hold those friendships intact by kind of walking around it. But I'll tell you, the last few weeks, just I've heard stories in my neighborhood and certainly seen it played out on social media. It's just hitting pretty close to home at this point. I think a lot of the blame, honestly, I mean, I won't say blame, but I think that COVID has certainly exacerbated our situation here. Our bandwidth is narrowed. We don't have our normal release valves available to us. So kind of all dials down to what's different between us right now.
Well, I mean, we should take a look at it at what accounts for this because I've seen this as well. I mean, I remember, I'm old enough to remember the hatred that people had for Reagan, and certainly, more recently Sarah Palin and George W. Bush in the last months of his presidency. But I've never seen anything like this. I mean, when Trump was elected, I mean, I had to leave a position. I
Mhm.
could no longer have my hair cut at the same place. I had to stop doing a particular television program in Boston because it could affect my family. And eventually I had to change my name. I mean, to do this podcast. I mean, I literally had to, and that was all because I publicly support the president and the president administration. And, I mean, this is something that goes beyond loyal opposition and legitimate concern. I mean, I get the fact that people may not like Trump's policies. Let them argue the policies. Well, that they may not like him as a person. Fine, but there's something more going on here. I mean,
Well,
this
you
is
know what?
like, yeah.
Oh, I see it both ways. That's the thing. I'm the moderate in the middle. I definitely have my opinions, but we've kind of latched onto extremes. Some of that I think is just being a little overloaded, and we tend sometimes, if too much is coming at us, and certainly if you look at the last 30 years or so and the digital onslaught that we've experienced, just everything, and we can't sort through everything. People are tending to sometimes grab onto an issue or two and just kind of hold tight to those instead of maybe being able to explore things a little more deeply. But, and then, yeah, if you are on the other side of that particular issue, I think with nerves being a little frayed by the continuation of this, I mean, it's been 4 years we've had tumult throughout. We have on both sides. It's just been a very dividing time. Significant. We will all remember this for years, but certainly not a highlight this particular year.
Well, I mean, I think that you mentioned the digital problem. I mean, the 24-hour news cycle, and I've never seen the news so openly at war with a president. I mean, it's one thing to have loyal opposition and to criticize, and even to take a few pot shots and maybe make some snide comments. But this has been, I mean, the New York Times regularly has released these stories with one anonymous source that is completely false, and then the next day they retract it on us on the last page, but the damage has been done. I mean, it's like a real war against this administration. I mean, the most recent example, the New York Times claimed, oh, the Taliban has endorsed Trump, right? I mean, then the next day they retracted it. There was no evidence for it. Somebody put an anonymous phone call. It would be like if I called up the Boston Globe and told them that Joe Biden had raped my mother. I mean, and they would have run that, and they're running it as a front page story. There's no accountability. They're not looking into it. They're actually setting this up, and I think that has really been a large reason why you have this kind of emotional anger and this sort of divisiveness and rage.
Well, I look back when I was a kid, I read a newspaper cover to cover. We now have the ability to pursue our own interests to the exclusivity. I mean, we miss a lot of other things. Many people pick one or two news sources. I was really proud to hear one of my kids say how he really makes a point of hitting all different viewpoints. And I think
Nice.
it's our responsibility because honestly, nobody has all the answers. And I think it's been easier for us to pick a candidate perhaps that seems to have more of them or more of the ones that are most important to us. But when we zero in on one particular group of people or a candidate or a party, I think we close off the good resources that are available with other viewpoints because we truly, our best decisions are going to be made with the more information we're able to gather. I always say plan B is always the better option for me personally, because plan A, I'm limited by my history and the information I've received up to this particular point in time. Plan B allows me to do some creative thinking and take in new information as it's available, if I'm open and ready to receive it. It's all about that pivot. Hopefully we aren't so closed-minded to one another at this point that we can't pivot and welcome all the ideas that together can maybe help us create the kind of, the better place than we have right now, certainly a country we can all be proud of, et cetera.
I hope so, because I think that that you make the point that we're all a bit fractionalized in terms of people looking at only left or right news
Mhm.
sources. But the problem is that if most people, I think, still only have time to watch the major networks. We're too busy working for a living. We're too tired when we come back from work. So your main source of news is Lester Holt.
Mhm.
And Lester Holt is slanted now. It doesn't, it's no longer, it's always been a little slanted, but now it's like they won't cover stories that don't favor their narrative. And I remember that all three major networks spent a segment on talking about the fact that President Trump had ordered an extra scoop of ice cream at a state dinner. Like this is big news.
Well,
It's gotten that bad.
I know there's always questionable news coverage choices, but I think, it's our responsibility. I honestly have found for myself, in order not to spend so much time in one particular place, that it's been better for me to bookmark several news sites. And then I work my way through all of them. And that way I kind of feel like I have a broader viewpoint. At least I'm able to understand the perspectives of others, because when we talk about bringing us all back together again, that's the only way we can do it, is to begin to take into account that other people's perspectives are going to lead them to different conclusions. It's the funny, we often share the same values, but we simply weight them differently based on what we personally have experienced. People forget that. And I think the more we can go back to saying, yes, we both care about this. This may be an issue of higher priority to you than me, but that's our common ground. And if, I look at almost where we are now as it looks almost, I don't know if you've gone through a divorce, for instance, you have to find a way to co-parent for the good of the kids, like for the good of the country. We have to figure out how to take this dysfunctional situation and make it functional. It's never going to be perfect, but we have to find those places that we unite on. And that means, letting go of some things. It certainly means respecting one another a lot more than I've been seeing.
Heather, you're the author of The Friendship Upgrade, and you talk about just what we're talking about here, how to at least coexist and reconcile relations and avoid getting into such a state of polarization that we could end up having a war and a civil war. And in fact, this is the first election I've ever seen,
Mhm.
and today is election day, so we can't just ignore that, where we have major cities actually boarding up their major stores
Right.
fronts in the downtown city because they're afraid of violence and rioting. It's what is this, a communist revolution? This is unheard of.
That the level of fear, and fear is a poor driver of decisions. Unfortunately, a lot of decisions, it seems like right now, a lot of reactions are coming out of a basic fear response. When you look at what we've been through, though, it's not surprising. We've gotten more and more we came into
Sure.
this year already in a state of isolation. Cigna does a study like they've done the last 3 years that I'm aware of, where they use the UCLA, I think it's UCLA loneliness scale, to kind of measure where people are on that in their personal lives. Coming into this, About half of us didn't have meaningful conversations or feel connected to the people we're with. And the thing is, when we get more isolated, as COVID has certainly done to us, we start having cognitive changes in terms of just the way we perceive things and the way that we respond and react to others. So we have a lot of that at play as well right now. People are more defensive. People are burned out on everything, and we're looking for easy answers. I had a friend yesterday say she felt unsafe because of, she lives in a nice neighborhood, but she feels unsafe because of, just where it is situated in town with the viewpoints. And I lost a Facebook friend over, a very innocent post on my part, but it set off a back and forth between people. It was really unfortunate. People just really didn't want to, how do I put this? People were not, they were latching on to labels again and kind of generalizing, I think sometimes, whereas, her experience had put her in a situation where she was fearful where she lived as well in the DC area. So, everybody's feeling this. That is at least something we have in common, even whatever side of the aisle we're on. Mm-hmm.
And, I've always been right of center. And when I started doing radio, I used to really like interviewing people on the other side and having great and sometimes ribald conversations. I've had on some of the great luminaries of the left, including Gloria Steinem and Noam Chomsky and others. And they used to come on with me, but now they don't. Nobody wants to talk to me anymore. Not because of me personally, but people don't talk to somebody on the other side. There's a complete, almost like a double universe going on. There's like a double, two sets of realities. And when you cross the divide, I noticed Michael Smirkanish, he's a big talk show host in Philadelphia, left of center, very reasonable. He's a lawyer. He's been on there for 30 years, very well respected by everyone. He made some mild comments on his show, praising President Trump for doing something. I don't remember even what it was, and it was not even a big deal. And he got threats. He got people calling to boycott his sponsors who had been with him for decades. He had to get on and he had to retract it.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, we the labels are quick to come sometimes. I have a neighbor who and I commented again on Facebook. I'm careful about it, but I'm not going to pretend I'm not who I am. I am I believe in unity for all of us. I think it's a lot of work right now, but I made a comment just about how his yard sign obviously canceled out my vote. We're kind of on different, but we have had some great conversations throughout this. I pass his.
That's amazing.
Place.
How does that work?
You know what? He told, I think it's just that we listen to one another, and I understand why he chooses the way he, why certain things are more important to him. But, just that understanding people, one of the great privileges of adulthood is autonomy and this freedom of choice. But we have to be willing to allow others to use it in the way they wish as well, as long as, kindness, respect, we aren't hurting anybody. But I think we're kind of, we've been very quick to shut people down.
Indeed. And look, we should understand that, of course, there are major political differences here, and that we're not going to necessarily agree, nor do we need to agree.
No.
But the kind of the more sort of civil way to go about it, and the way that we usually do, is to have debates in public and have arguments, sometimes get emotional, but yet at the same time be friendly. I think about the relationship between Reagan and Tip O'Neill. They were absolutely at loggerheads, and they would totally rip each other, and then they'd go out and have a beer later, or late Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia.
Right.
Very close friends. They'd vacation together. Their families would vacation. And yet they were completely opposite on issues of very serious issues.
Right.
So it can be done.
Right. Yeah. I did some interviews after her passing. And I remember one of the quotes I remember just was, she said he sharpened her. And I think that is the best scenario where we really do help one another, see the world with a broader perspective, and maybe take in some ideas that weren't on our radar. I will be the first to say, I do not have all my answers. I've told my kids that I'm a mom of 3. And I, gosh, I have arguably have had more input in their lives than anybody else, perhaps, at least to a certain point. And still we don't agree on everything. And
Of
yet
course, no
that's
reason why you
okay.
should.
And it's good that way. Who we don't want clones of ourselves running around, right?
That's right. I mean,
Mhm.
same with me. I mean, my daughter's a very independent thinker and not
Mhm.
in agreement with me, which is fine.
Right. And
You
so I
know.
guess we need to kind of afford that to those our neighbors and our friends as well. Perhaps we're a little more forgiving with some of our, with our younger family members, perhaps, than we are with the world at large.
Well, your book is very inspiring in terms of helping people talk through some of these conflicts and just kind of learning to coexist at a time when we all recognize that for the common greater good, we need to do that. We don't want to devolve into a lawless society where everyone is fighting. That's not going to help anybody.
Well, we all have this base need for connection, and isolation literally can kill over time. And we've got to find our ways to connect. That's where I come in. I think that if here's a story. When in 2020, I'm on my way to my dad's viewing. Okay, not a great day. I'm in rush hour traffic trying to get off. I'm sure. Well, I know rush hour in the Boston area is horrible. I've driven in that
Very
as
bad.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm obviously upset and trying to get off the freeway. Gentleman pulls up beside me. I'm thinking maybe a little help here. And you know what he did? He leaned on his horn and he gave me the finger. and and in that moment though, I thought, I don't know. I don't have a clue what's going on in anybody's life. I mean, even the people I know intimately, I don't understand where they are because I don't have all the information. And so I kind of repurposed that little moment, that gift that he gave me into that understanding that, that I don't have that. And that I need to not jump to conclusions about things that I don't have the full story on. So I kind of go along thinking, I'm generally doing the best I can with all the information, the tools that I've gathered up to now, in the context of my personal life. I'm doing the best I can, with what I know right now. And
Right.
I think I have to put that assumption on others, because it's certainly not up to me to decide, they may not have as many tools as I do. They may have a totally, different set of values than I do, but it's their privilege to be able to use those in the way that they see best. So the more we, if they're doing the best they can, I don't know how we can ask for more than that.
No, yeah, it's a point well taken. You can't know what's going on in someone else's life at any given time, and you don't have to take everything personally.
Mhm.
What about how do you think the pandemic has affected people specifically, but our society generally, and what do you think about the fact that we now have several governors, including Massachusetts, that are talking about reimposing curfews and in the case of California, the governor actually came up with directives on how to eat Thanksgiving dinner and
Mhm.
how many people you can have and what you can eat.
It's
What do you think about that? I mean, is that a good thing?
This is a tough walk. I mean, all of us have older, if not relatives, we have older family members we're concerned about. The isolation, as I said, is horrible. This has been a very challenging time. I would not want to have to make some of those big decisions at times because it is weighing one good against another. And I understand that. And again, it's the weight of where we put, what weight we put on each particular value.
Hmm.
But, on the isolation, I mentioned the cognitive changes that occur with this. That's something at least we can be aware of in our own selves, hopefully, and to be a little more gracious towards others, understanding that, people are not at their best right now. We've grown, people are weary. We haven't had the release valves we do. And, people know they need to get connected, but we're kind of getting into these new habits now. And, people call it the new normal. I dislike that because there's nothing normal about it. I'd like to think of it as with the new familiar, it's a familiar situation,
Hmm.
unfortunately, strangely familiar, but it's not somewhere we want to stay.
No, it's not. But yet there can be a silver lining to it in many ways in terms of just becoming more self-sufficient, more actualized, learning to communicate with people a little bit differently. Things. I mean, I mean, I feel badly though for younger people, for children. who are
Right.
being kept out of school. That's very bad. I don't think it's necessary either.
Well, I think the reliance on social media is a difficulty. It definitely narrows our perspectives considerably. I love, I'm out every day outdoors. I'm outdoors is really big.
Yes.
I'm actually on crutches right now, and I have loops I do on my crutches because
No, I agree. I mean, I take a
I need it.
long walk every day up
Yeah.
this hill. I mean, there are these
Mhm.
200 steps, I call it, that I
Right.
take.
And we need to fit those things in our lives. It's a
Yeah.
centering thing. It's also a way to safely see others if there's concern about that. And just to kind of remind us that the world's a little bigger than what's on our computer screen and within our four walls. But it's again, it takes some motivation. And when people are kind of burned out on everything and feeling like they're struggling just to cover the basics right now, in terms, I mean, emotionally, depression's up. It's a bad place. It's a bad
Yes, it
place.
is. And things like alcoholism and
Mhm.
suicide, even
Right.
the other sort of unspoken thing is that people are not getting needed medical care because they're afraid of going out.
Mhm.
People aren't going to the dentist. They're not going to eye doctors. They're not getting heart
It-
exams,
yeah.
cancer treatments. Very,
The-
very bad.
yeah. No, I mean, I can't imagine. Well, it's a pretty rough scenario. And unfortunately, we were not able to avoid it as I'd hoped. But
Right.
I think we have to look. One of the big issues for people is that out of control thing that we all feel so terribly right now. Everything looks so ambiguous. In reality, ambiguity is always there. We just think we know what's coming up ahead of us. Now it's really clear that it just feels very random. So it's important to kind of pick out those things that are within your control to make your life and maybe hopefully the life of somebody else better. Let's continue the more we can look outward, that's a proven way. I mean, it makes you feel better too. And I'm big on that regardless, but it kind of reminds you that your world's bigger than you and that you have something of value to add. And it's kind of, it is a boost to help somebody else. And there's so many people that need that right now. I would even suggest, as we come out of this and have to begin repairing some of these relationships, and I hope that we will, there's big fractures and we can't live that way. We got to, like I said, co-parent somehow. You look for those commonalities that we share. You look for, maybe basic interests that were shared at one point. Bike riding, you can be together and not talk so much, and it might be a good
Yeah.
start.
You're talking about, I mean, I just was going to ask you that because, I don't want to catch this terrible disease, but yet at the same time, I go out, I'll put on the mask if I'm going in to order a lunch or something, but I don't wear it on the street and I wash my hands, but I'm going to get on with my life. And yet I know people who are so frightened that they will not even barely go out. And they're like,
Yeah,
they step out the door and they're wiping the doorknob down with rags and they're just, I think that that's unhealthy. I mean, that's my opinion, and people have their own ways to cope with the situation. But
right,
I just don't. I think there's some. I know somebody they wiping down the groceries with alcohol. I
right.
mean, it's just
Well, I think
it's
the
beyond.
risks play out different in everybody's life. I mean, we all have different things to contend with. When you mentioned being out, my daughter and I hesitated to travel, but we found a safe way to do it. And before this surgery I mentioned, we went out to Colorado to hike because that's one of our favorite things, to hit those mountain trails. And, it was
Right.
wonderful we had our face covers, and when we passed on the trails, we pulled them up with people. But it was just a really nice respite and a way for the two of us to connect in a deeper way. She lives out of state, so that was just a wonderful time for us. But I do that here safely, apart from people. I don't want to ever put anybody else at risk.
Right,
But
of course. You take
yeah,
reasonable precautions, but yet you're conducting your affairs. I mean, you're doing what you need to do, and not letting the situation turn us into, like, couch potatoes where we just stay in. I mean,
it would, yeah. The indoor thing is difficult, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to go into public places as much as I'm able to avoid them. I do grocery shop, but I do it carefully. Um,
exactly.
and yeah, but I'm thinking even, a way to connect with somebody that perhaps you've had a divisive relationship through this, even is to, find something new that you can do to help others together. Like maybe together, donate blood once a month. Maybe you look at the food insecurity situation in your area and look for a way to,
Yeah.
so you're kind of redefining the relationship, moving it into a positive place, at least on one aspect. and then, it's going to take time. We're not going to solve this overnight. And I think when people, like, if anybody has dreams of launching into a big, let's get it past all this a day after this election is finally decided, I think that's kind of naive. I think we have to approach it in small steps.
I agree. And also, I think that what you alluded to, the fact that there is nothing more satisfying and more normal to a person than to do something that helps somebody else improve their life. I mean,
Right.
that's a very natural thing to want to do. And it's something that you can feel a sense of accomplishment for doing
Mhm.
because you have accomplished something.
Right. When quick, but when my I had a bunch of deaths about 20 years ago, and ended up doing grandparent care for a few years. And one of the things, my world was flipped big time. I was also going through divorce. It was a rough time. But one of my set points was I had two grandmothers in side-by-side nursing homes. And so if every day I would go and visit both of them, I would find a way to do that. And that, at least when the rest of the world was a little jumbled, I knew I had accomplished that one good thing that day. And that made
Exactly.
all the difference,
That's right. I mean, I went through something similar with my late father. I mean, you just you would do it every week, and you would have a sense of calm
Right.
and a sense of fulfillment from that. So, Heather, your book, The Friendship Upgrade, where can people get it? Do you want to send people to a website?
I will. And I'm going to show you because I'm on crutches, I'm not set up the way I normally would be
There
here.
you go.
Here's a cover. There's also another one called Date Like a Grown Up. But my website is heatherduganauthor.com. I am also on LinkedIn, Friendship. The books can be, what did I say? LinkedIn, Facebook.
Facebook.
And you can also find the books on Amazon. My publisher is Headline Books. But yeah, I love to connect with people. So reach out if you've watched this and want to connect. I love hearing stories. My books have a lot of people's personal stories included
That's nice.
because that's what we learn from, right?
Exactly. Storytelling is the best way to go, and you're a good writer. So, anyway, Heather, listen, I want to thank you very much, and don't be afraid to go out and vote. And thank you
Oh,
very
I
much.
got it done. Thank you.